our conversation around democratizing information and access for all. And so, to that note, we're going to talk a little bit about artificial intelligence. And AI is definitely becoming an everyday part of my life. I don't know about you all, but I find myself asking questions about day to day business things and also just things like the weather. So we're going to definitely be hearing on this next panel about how new technology can help with answering questions and also with our social responsibility, with our accountability, and thinking through what needs to be considered. And just want to go ahead and thank Amazon Web Services because they are supporting the panel that we're about to enjoy.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you for that. I'm so excited to be here and to have this conversation with these three phenomenal panelists that you will meet in a moment. My name is Afua Bruce. I'm an engineer by training who has worked at the White House, led a nonprofit that did data science and AI for mission-driven organizations around the world. And I now consult with organizations across sectors who are interested in building a responsible tech and data ecosystem and responsible tech and data solutions. I'm excited, as I said, to be joined by these three other AI experts today to briefly explore how, even as AI rapidly develops, we can consider ways to design, develop, and deploy the technology in ways that minimizes harm. This powerful technology that in some cases and in many applications saves time, increases business productivity, and helps us learn more, can also further exclude marginalized populations and prevent people from accessing resources they should be able to obtain. I'm going to start first with you, Dia. And Dia Wen, you're the responsible AI lead at Amazon Web Services. Amazon obviously is very active in the AI and innovation space. Can you speak to the approach you've developed to balance the business benefits of AI while minimizing risks and unintended consequences?
So, okay, I just wanted to make sure that was on. Is it morning still? Good morning. This week has been moving so quickly, it seems like. So thank you so much for having me, and I'm excited to be able to share in this venue, and I'm glad that we're taking opportunities to talk about benefit risks of AI because it is an area that is extremely critical to and influencing the way in which we live, work, the information we consume, even the people with whom we engage. So it's super important topic for us to be considering. And how do we do that in ways in order to be able to get the greatest benefit, right? And hopefully that's benefit for everyone, not just, those that are seeking to have sort of financial gain because they're technology providers or, integrating that into their products, but benefit for all of society. So I've had the privilege of being able to lead that work at Amazon Web Services and started our customer facing practice. And for us, one of the first things is about thinking about this in the context of people. That are people taking a people-centered approach because we are, customer focused. It means that we also care about our customers. And so making sure that we're centering on people and the benefit that people gain is one of those core elements. But then looking at this holistically to understand that in order to gain the greatest benefit, it's not just about introducing a technology solution, but that we also need to consider people, process, and technology, and creating a culture of responsibility in an organization in order to be able to drive and inculcate responsible, sort of trustworthy, ethical practices into the way in which we work so that ultimately in the end, it's not a separate work stream, but it's consistent with the way in which we build and the way we do work. So some of that starts, first with having an internal strategy beyond just like what we do and wanting to be able to help service our customers and provide benefits, best practices, tooling, technology to aid them. It's also ensuring that we inculcate that into the way in which we're building and delivering. So we have an overarching responsible AI strategy that drives and motivates how we build and then essentially how we engage with our customers. The first of that is thinking about, again, people-centered focus and how we invest in the next generation of diverse individuals that are going to be influencing the technology. The second is ensuring that we're integrating responsible AI into our entire life cycle from the very beginning when we think about conceptualizing a product until when, we deliver that and what it looks like in deployment. The third is about, how we provide tools, services, resources, best practice guidance to our customers, and then finally continuing to advance the science of responsible AI. And that's important because this is an area that we weren't always talking about and certainly not focused on. But there are some things as technology is advancing that we still don't have it's complete answers for. We don't have those problems solved. And we should expect that as technology advances and changes and iterates, that we're iterating as well and looking to bring the best of breed practices into how we deliver, but also to be able to provide those to our customers to help guide them as well.
Thanks so much for that. I loved and appreciated so much of what you said, especially that as we develop AI, we should make sure that it's for the benefit of everyone, not just those who have an opportunity for financial gain, and that also developing responsible AI isn't its own separate work stream. It really, as you said, needs to come down to creating a culture of responsibility in organizations that make responsibility consistent across the ways that we work. Juan Manuel Contreras, you are the co-founder and CEO of Aymara, a company that builds developer tools for enterprises to measure, monitor, and improve the safety, accuracy, and tone of their generative AI applications. I know Aymara focuses on ensuring that AI solutions are inclusive and minimize bias. So building on some of the responsibility themes that Dia touched on. But in your work, can you talk a little bit about how we can build the capacity of technologists at both big and small organizations to protect against these risks of, again, minimizing bias and making sure AI is inclusive?
Sure. I would say that it's a three-step process. So the first one is you want to have a governance plan in place for what AI safety looks like for you and what you want to do about it. So depending on what kind of company you are and how you're using AI, that's going to look very different. If you have an AI chatbot that advises people on how to buy homes, then you care about ensuring that the quality of your AI is similar for members of different protected categories. If you allow people to generate images, you want to prevent against deepfakes and things like that. So depending on what your AI application is, you're going to want to define governance differently. Once you've done that, then you need to figure out roles and responsibilities in your organization for who is going to tackle what parts. So legal, regulatory, compliance teams are going to have very different roles in engineering, product, or operations. So once you have an understanding of who does what, then you can move to the last step, which is then just implementing how it is you're going to tackle both the measurement and then the improvement of AI safety in your AI usage or in your AI products. Here, unfortunately, there's a little bit of a gap between organizations that don't have the technical staff to modify or adapt their AI solutions beyond what model providers can give them. Absent any sort of AI safety regulation, like is the case in the United States, for example, we're left to whatever it is model providers want to give us in terms of safety in their tools. So all model providers offer some level of safety guardrailing for their tools, but it's very one size fits all. It's not really customized to specific applications. And unfortunately, companies that are using AI that don't have technical teams to modify those models are a little bit left to their own devices. It's those with technical tools that can start using some of the architecture that AWS provides or use software like the one that Aymara builds that can then start customizing AI safety solutions and be able to measure, monitor, and improve AI safety in their businesses. So that's the advice I would give.
Great. Thank you so much for that. I think just to recap what you said about those three steps, making sure that companies have a governance plan that's customized for their communities and customers and for their AI applications. Two, defining roles and responsibilities. And three, implementing measurements measurements and evaluation for improvement of AI safety. I think when you touched on a lack of regulation in the US and many other places around the world that are using AI, I think it's important for companies to recognize their power in that situation, because in the absence of regulation, your technologists, your coders, your companies, your business leaders become de facto regulators of how this technology is used. Arun, I'm going to turn to you next because you look, I think, more explicitly at some of what government does and industry does in this space. Arun Gupta, you are the CEO of the NobleReach Foundation, which brings together America's best and brightest from industry, academia, and government to develop emerging technologies and scientific advancements to secure our nation's future. So in your view, how is AI being leveraged by the public sector to solve complex challenges? And what else needs to happen to enable government to adopt the technology at scale?
Well, thank you for the question, and thank you for having us here today. Just for context, I'm CEO of NobleReach. We're about a $500 million endowment, and we're really looking to try to get our best tech talent, think Teach for America, going into government service to start their career and create that infrastructure. So we just launched a program where we've got 20 students going in, primarily AI students. People have graduated with master's degrees, going across 8 agencies: Navy, CISA, DOD, Space Force, Treasury, HUD, FDA. And it really is part of the theory of the change here is that we need our best talent going in. Everyone talks policy, everyone talks governance, no one talks talent, right? And the rubber hits the road with talents. When we talk about government, we need to, less than 7% of tech workers in government are under the age of 30 right now. True stat. We need to fix that. And we need to think about how do we create the narrative so that our top talent thinks about starting their career in government for a couple of years. And then they can kind of go and do whatever they, choose to do, much like many people do with Teach for America. So that's what I share that because that's the lens I bring to the table. I was a VC for 25 years. When I think of, I was teaching, and I still teach here at Georgetown. And the other lens I bring to the table is the commonality between teaching on a university campus and being a VC is you're surrounded by optimists, right? Entrepreneurs are intrinsically optimistic, and if you're on a college campus, you're intrinsically optimist. And so that's the other lens I try to bring to the table. And so I say that because I think there's a lot of focus, rightfully so, on governance and risk and everything else. We don't have enough narrative right now talking about the optimistic part of what AI can do to be the great leveler. Around education and what it can do. There's a lot of studies out there now that say, those that use AI, you could bring the bottom half up to the median, right? That's a big deal, right? So while I completely respect the focus on governance and risk and things of that sort, when I think of where government can play a big role, right? One is internally the efficiency that it can bring to make government more efficient. Right. But to do that, we need talent that knows how to use AI. Right. You can't expect people inside to be versant in this. So I think recruiting is the number one thing that we need to be getting talented. And that's what we're trying to help with. I think second is, and it doesn't get talked about enough, is access. If you think about the big divide that we have, the digital divide that we talked about with narrowband and broadband, communities that didn't have access to broadband got left behind. The same dynamic's going to happen with AI. If we don't make AI accessible to underserved communities that don't have access to it, they will get left behind in a more accelerated rate given the velocity of change. And that's a role where government can really kind of help step in, right? And collaborate with the private sector to think about, like, how do we make this accessible to communities that can't afford it in the same way? And the third thing I would say is encourage experimentation. There's now studies out there. I think BCG did one with their analysts, and a couple interesting things. They gave all their analysts, incoming analysts, access to AI tools. Half they provided training to, half they provided no training to. The result of that, what they realized is afterwards, they performed no differently. So what's the point? Training isn't the issue, it's access, right? We should be giving, if these students coming in without any training can perform as well as students that have been trained, whatever that means, on AI, we need to do that. The second thing that they found is that with their analyst group is that the bottom half of their analyst group started performing way better and almost like the median. The top quartile didn't perform that much differently. right? So what you realize is that your high performers will still continue to perform as high performers, but you are able to start leveling the playing field in a meaningful way. That has real implications, ramifications, if we create the right access around it. So that's what I would say is probably the role that government can be playing a little bit more. I don't think we talk about that enough, because I think that the scaring, Terminator narrative gets out there too quickly. And then if you're an underserved community, you're even more apprehensive to want to engage with this new technology.
Thanks so much, Arun. I will say I'm excited and glad to be starting my day off today. Well, not really starting anymore, but spending my day today with other people who are optimists. And I think, like you said, it's important for us to figure out how we can paint an affirmative vision and a positive vision for what's in the future, especially as it relates to AI. And as someone who spent several years in government service, I completely agree that it's important to really think about how we get the right talent into government so we can work to increase access.
Can I just share one other observation, if you don't mind on that? So I was with Anna Makunju, who is the head of global government policy at OpenAI. And just to put an emphasis on that point, she traveled to 30 countries around the world with Sam Altman, meeting with government leaders around AI. And I asked her, like, what was your biggest observation when you came back from that? And her observation was there was an inverse correlation between optimism of AI and GDP. Meaning that the wealthier the nation, the more they were worried about the downside of AI. The poorer the nation, the more they were worried about, like, how can I use this to do something optimistic? How do I get myself, increase agricultural demand or things of that sort? And I think that actually is true with communities, right? The wealthier you are, you're like, whoa, how is this going to upset the apple cart, right? But this is why we need to get access to, underserved communities, because they're going to want to experiment at a different level than more established communities will.
I think that's certainly an interesting point in thinking about where we can have optimism, and also where I think responsibility lies for designing the tools and mitigating some of the bias concerns that we talked about earlier, and making sure that the technology is properly and responsibly developed, so that whoever is experimenting can do so in ways that still retain human dignity, in ways in which people still can be seen in the data and in the tools. I see that we are quickly coming up on time. So I think, Arun, you also mentioned in your remarks, you touched on a movie reference. And so I think that pre the release of ChatGPT, a lot of people's perceptions of what was possible with AI was tied to what happened in science fiction movies and stories, and what we created in that realm. So I'm gonna let you each take maybe about a minute to respond to, now as we look forward from where we are now, about 2 years after ChatGPT's open release, what can we be looking forward to when it comes to AI, and what's a concern that we should have? Juan, I'll start with you.
Sure. So as an AI founder, I spend most of my waking life and some of my dreaming life thinking about this. I think it's really exciting that we're potentially moving towards a world in which every single one of us may be able to have access to really high quality medical, mental health, financial, legal service and advice for a fraction of the cost that it currently takes to access it. And there's like an optimism to that. There's a sense of having equality of access to these kinds of services. That's the promise. But the peril is that the way in which we're building this technology, if it's underregulated, if we don't think enough about safety and too much about the profit motive, is that there's also a dystopian world in which these services are only available to people who can afford it, or only in certain countries, or we become dependent on this technology in a way that's pretty unhealthy. So I'm excited about the ways in which we're moving forward to creating the world that I described in the beginning, while also building the tools and the capacity and the understanding of people, both as technologists, but also for all of us as citizens, to demand of our representatives that we build a world that looks a little bit more like the latter one.
Thank you so much. Dia.
So I love that, right? The idea that the future could be one where we level the playing field, and that folks that typically have been underserved, underrepresented, and marginalized actually have a little bit more opportunity stake in the game, you know, and that AI can be a bridge, not a barrier, that enables us to all reach our full potential and that we can work towards building a more equitable world. The reality is that I think that that is absolutely possible with the technology, but that does not happen without the kind of intentional action to think about who we are not considering, to make sure the voice and perspective of those that typically are not considered are being considered, that we don't build for a majority population or a majority of those that are in positions of power, but actually consider those that typically would not be served, that we actually do the kind of intentional things to make sure that we're addressing questions of privacy and security, and that we're providing the necessary transparency. We're thinking about fairness, and not just in the design of the implements of the systems, but also in the way they get deployed and what that means in the real world, right? But I think that we have an opportunity. We're at a place and a position where the conversations are being had, and we can certainly reshape and reimagine, you know, what is possible if we're all taking the kind of responsibility that we all have a responsibility in. Responsible AI, a trustworthy AI is everybody's responsibility, not just a data scientist, not just the technical folk, not just the technology providers, but we all have a job to play in ensuring that we have the kind of technology future that benefits us all.
Thanks so much, Arun.
So look, I'm clearly an AI optimist. I think this is, you know, we need to really promote access and prioritize that, and would encourage that. I think we also need to amplify positive stories, right? I just think too much of it is around risk and concern and bias and, you know, all the negative perceptions of what can happen, and that just makes people then reluctant to want to engage with the technology, right? And then I think we also have to remember that anytime there's change, there's always going to be people unsettled with this. Like a lot of the same dialogue that people are saying today, you know, for those of us that were around when, you know, in the late 90s, when the internet came around, people were saying the same thing, right? And then we just need to figure out how do we work in this new environment. And so that's kind of the lens I bring to it. And I think we've seen phenomenal gains from that. We've also seen downsides from that. The difference this time is that we at least have model to know like what kind of worked and what we should do differently. So there needs to be governance rules, because we saw what happened with social media when you don't do any of that, right? But that doesn't mean we don't engage with the technology. And so I just don't want to have that get lost in the process.
Yeah, thanks so much. I think just to recap, I think all of these are such wonderful things for us to keep in mind. We need to continue to work to increase access to and encouraging experimentation when it comes to AI. There are a lot of positive applications and even more applications that we haven't imagined yet, I'm sure. As Juan Manuel, you said, working towards a world where because of AI, we can have access to higher quality services. More people can have more access. And Dia, I think you summed it up so well, that we can do all of this responsibly if we're intentional, because trustworthy responsible AI